We're live. Okay. Welcome everyone who's listening live and who will listen to this in the future. I would like to introduce Matt Jones, who will be speaking to us today about issues of designing for mobility. So a much broader topics than just designing mobile interfaces. Yeah, off to Matt. Could you tell us what your background is? Yes, what your background is and what you're working on, and just give a brief introduction of the topic.
And please just interrupt me. I'm a professional waffler. So as soon as you are bored or you want to ask a question or interrupt, it's much better for you to stop me. For anyone who's joined us here, I can see a few little boxes at the bottom with people's names in. Please just interrupt me. The introduction to me. I started doing mobile type. We didn't call it interaction design then. The term wasn't invented in 1995, which is a very long time ago. And even Google filters can't disguise that from my agedness. I tried finding a filter that would make me look younger, but I couldn't. I've been working on this a long, long time. When we started, of course, the platforms were very, very limited, very small screens, black and white, tiny keyboards. But it was a very exciting time because when I got into it, we were just moving into a phase where people were beginning to think about how to go beyond simple SMSing and calling. And so we worked very early on with a company, an industrial partner, trying to understand how we might get fast access to services and content over some limited bandwidth, using some innovation on how you type stuff into the very simple browser and search engine we were producing. So I was back in 94, 95, and then I got hooked on mobile stuff. Basically, I was just there at the right time. Nobody else was doing it. I wasn't very clever. But you didn't need to be clever. You just need to do something. And so it was a fantastic opportunity. And from that point, we worked with searching, browsing of content, trying to be ahead, obviously, as I guess all of us are, of the technology timeline to anticipate the sorts of sensor and software and ecosystem that was evolving, and then to be imaginative around potential products, devices, and services. So during that timeline between then and now, which is what, 21 years. 21 years and on a small screen. That's my life. Look at that. That's why I've got a bit mad.
No, that's very good. Sorry, can I interrupt right away? Because I think I have a very good question to ask you. Something actually that I have been wondering about. So you say you started designing in 1995 for devices with terrible keyboards and small screens, and this is where people were all about SMS. And I find it fascinating that today, in 2015, one of the biggest growth opportunities and favorite products of everyone is WhatsApp, which is basically a text messaging device, but just with like one main feature, which is you can easily make groups and send images. That's it. Like, how is this possible? Does it have to do something with mobile design, or does it have to do with human beings? Like, I just don't understand. I mean, I understand why I love it, but I wanted to hear your perspective on this. Why are we still doing the same thing?
That's a really, really great question. I mean, both SMS and WhatsApp are, clearly the SMS was a platform and WhatsApp is a platform. And what people did with SMS was that they felt that they could appropriate it and they could make it their own. In SMS, it was a case of, the language that they created. In some parts of the world, people have used that SMS to save money because it's much cheaper than making calls or sending other content. WhatsApp, again, and it's expanding the range of affordances it has, is ultimately a platform for play and teasing and socializing and working and productivity. It doesn't limit the horizons of users. It doesn't close them in. The notion of an app, one of the big problems of it is, and one of the blessings is that it, kind of gives in a bite-sized form a limited function. The problem with that is that you think, well, this app doesn't do everything for me, so I need another app and another app and another app. WhatsApp app, of course, is all about allowing the user to get all sorts of things done with a very underspecified interface and lots of room for people to use it in many ways. So I think that is a very important thing in mobile design, something that we have tried to focus on in other domains, where you give the agency to the person rather than to lock them into a particular way of working or seeing the world. So we've done some of that around navigation systems. So when we started doing them, one of the most obvious things to do was to get people to go from A to B in the most efficient manner using a mobile device. And of course, that's a good thing. But what you actually want, I think, in addition to that, is a platform where people can have a sense of being in control and making choices and using the navigation features for more than simple utility. And so we built systems where, we don't give direct advice, turn left immediately here. We give people a sense of, well, there might be something interesting broadly over there. Or if you want to get to your destination, well, you can go anywhere in this arc. You don't have to go here. If you go here, maybe it's the most efficient way. But open your eyes, have a look around. Is there a big puddle in front of you? Perhaps you want to go around it. Perhaps you can see a coffee shop that you want to go on the way. So just go on the way. You've got that flexibility. And that's, I think, really important to give our users a sense that they have agency. One of the big motivators for our work most recently is that that kind of very much of a heads down, locked into the dark screen, which I think is sucking the creativity and agency and sociality, all those things, you've all read about them. And that's what's driving me now 20 years later. And I think you're absolutely right to ask that question. Back 20 years ago, mobile design was sort of unconstraining, partly because of the lack of sensors and actuators, and what we're trying to build things so people could express themselves. Strangely, as we've got more and more functionality and high-end devices, we're almost like chaining people with very small versions of a desktop computer with all the power, which is acting as a ball and chain rather than a liberator. There's a bit of a rant. I won't answer every question like that. Let's have a simpler question.
No. This was a very, very, very good answer, and actually, it makes me think of a very interesting experiment, I guess, / invention that I've heard about it actually at Kai this year, which was this guy who invented a navigating system which would send you electric shocks to your legs as you walk around town to tell you turn left, turn right, and possibly drive you exactly into a pedal. So you don't think that this is a good example of design for mobility?
I think that, what's the right word for it? Nuts? Wrong? Stupid? Great. Great that people are doing research into this, but I think that what we actually want to do is to give people a sense that they are free from that digital, almost doppelganger. We're creating identities in our digital world, and the danger, I think, is that they are becoming literally a doppelganger. So this thing is connected to me, in some philosophical way, and as there's a change here, I change. Rather than, thinking, this is important, but here I am embodied, here I am talking to you embodied, that's the most important thing. So I wouldn't go down that route. We've done things where the device can be in the pocket and give a slight vibration to make you look around and make some choices. So the idea is about giving some haptic stimulation is not a negative, but making it so that you have no agency or very little agency, I think, is something I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. Remember, the great thing about design is that we need different propositions and different perspectives. So I'm not here to pontificate, really, to say, I think it's a crazy idea. The nice thing about design is it's a conversation. I wouldn't use those words.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you did some work around designing maps and giving people agency to navigate differently, and you mentioned, I think, some of these features, but what else did you do to to kind of give people that same sense that they're on a platform and they can own it for whatever it is that they want to do, that they can change it in any way that they want to do. Like, for example, SMS changed the way in which people spoke to each other and created a whole set of emoticons that became current conversation
Yeah,
elements.
I'll give you a few examples. One was a system called Questions Not Answers, which was a project funded and in collaboration with when was it? Microsoft Research. And so what we were interested in there was producing a mobile-based search platform where instead of you typing in your own queries in a space, of course you could do this, you would open up your phone and it would show you an overlay of your current location and then show the zeitgeist, if you like, in Google terms, of the search terms that were being put in by people at that time. Now, what we're trying to do, and we were experimenting, would those words give people a sense of the place being a function of the physical geography, the people, and the temporal aspects. So that was our conceptualization of the place and space. And we wanted to know whether or not, at different times, clearly at different times, if you observe a space, you see different people passing through it. There are different rhythms for a space on a bank holiday versus when people are rushing and commuting to work. And our ideas then were saying, well, perhaps we could surface that by processing the search terms that were coming in from people in those places at that time or at different times. So someone could look at, just like, say, you go to Google Maps and you want to see what the traffic is like right now, and you have then a look what it's like usually on a Friday. Well, let's have a look what this place is like usually on a Friday night. And let's do that by looking at search terms which were entered on a Friday night. So these are just bubbling up, and it's for people then to make sense of that. So we didn't want to do too much, and we didn't do much kind of machine learning and categorization, and we were just showing them in real time or in historic real time the things that people were putting in. Mm-hmm. People liked it. People liked the idea of that they were connected to something rather than just an algorithm showing them the best things right now. They were seeing unfiltered thoughts and connections with people. They could tap on those things and they could then see the search results. Obviously, as a platform, you could imagine connecting with people in real time or perhaps buying things in real time. So again, it was trying to open up questions rather than to give someone a right answer. Mm-hmm. And that is a very distinct proposition to saying, I know where you are, I know who you are, I will give you what you need now. We need both, I think, but I think a lot of the conversation amongst mobile has been trying to give someone, it's all about mobility, all about, well, people are busy, people have limited resources, let's give them an answer. Okay? Yeah. And that's good, that's really good, and I've done some work in that space, but there's another space which is
serendipity.
Yeah,
serendipitous discovery of knowledge. I completely know the value of that, because this is really what stimulates creativity. And I mean, especially, I'm a financial analyst by trade, but my PhD gives me lots of inspirations for the work that I do on a daily basis. So I can see how this project would do the same. You also said one other interesting thing, which is that we're trying to recreate with mobile phones. We're trying to recreate mini versions of our desktop computers. And I think one of the questions that I propose for the discussion we're going to have with everyone on Thursday is, what is the alternative? Like, if you had no constraint, unlimited money, and all the technological solutions that you wanted, what kind of a mobile interface would you like to have?
So that's a very good question, isn't it? I think for me, I'll just give you an example story about how one mobile interface kind of lifted my head about possibilities. It was around one of my children, Rosie, and we went to Finland and we bought one of these TomTom devices. And of course, that TomTom device had lots of processing power, and it was helping us get around the lakes around Finland. We were traveling around, and she said, "Daddy, where's the bear?" And my two sons really laughed because they just thought she was being stupid. And I said, "There are bears in Finland, but I don't think they're out here on the main road." Carry on driving, and then 10 minutes later she said, "No, no, no, where are the bears?" And so I pulled over because I try to be a good father. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she says, "That device keeps saying in 100 yards, bear to the left, and in 200 yards, bear to the right." And just like you're going to, I mean, she was about, I think she was about 8 or 9. And from that point on, for the entire 3 months, whenever it said bear to the left or bear to the right, we looked out the window and tried to see a rock or a cloud that looked like a bear. So what that mobile did was to platform a new game. I talked to the designers of sat-navs. They haven't got that use case. All right. So I guess in my ideal world, what I want is to use all the fantastic processing sensors, resources, to provide ways for people to keep their heads up and to look at their world and to relate to it, be it people or places, in more effective ways, rather than just like, I mean, the model of having, like, say, this big Mac here, and then stuffing it into here, is that it completely consumes my attention and demands my attention. So I just want to design things that, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not smashing these up. I've made a lot of my career out of this, right? For at least 21 years, I've got small children to feed. I'm going to continue to say this is a good thing, because it's a good thing for the world to have this sort of power mobile, but very bad if it becomes this draw down out of the world. So we are currently working on things that will try to limit the amount of attention that you need to get the full benefit of the resource that you could have in your pocket or wherever you're going to carry it.
Mm-hmm. So does this mean that you're doing lots of, because you're saying, you need to take your eyes off from the device, does this mean that then we need to pay attention by listening, or what kind of, and you already said that those electric shocks as a way of telling us where to go is not a good way of telling us things. So what are the means in which the device can communicate back to you, I guess?
Yeah, and I think for anyone who's doing design in this space, I mean, some obvious things that people could think of, like a kind of heads-up display, or having an ambient or a connection in an audio display. I think the audio side of thing still hasn't been fully exploited. So some of our first navigation work was done based on adapting the music that somebody was listening to. So if you look around, a lot of people are wearing headphones all the time. They're doing that because they want to listen to music or podcasts, or perhaps they're even listening to, some lecture. This is a well-ingrained mainstream practice. But of course, all us designers jump to, let's do something else. Let's build another gadget that you have to put here or strap onto your legs. So, I mean, certainly I would put out to anyone watching this that think more about how you can blend content and services into a mainstream practice. I mean, with the navigation thing, what we did was to gently pan the music in 3D space to give someone a sense roughly where they should be heading. And people liked that very much because it didn't interrupt with the music playback with a speech command, and it still had this sort of vagueness about it. Because you could just hear this panning going, and also it had this strange. We didn't have it perfectly done. Some bands have this, they move the music around anyway, and so people would start wandering off because they thought it was the system telling them to go left, but it was in fact the musician just panning the music. But they seemed to cope, and they liked it. So audio is an important channel. Things that don't require you to pay attention in contrast at all most of the time. So obviously there is a space around wearables, which is interesting to us. I think all of us who are doing any design, and the tension there is a tension that all Android and Apple are playing with, is how do you avoid people getting actually more addicted? So always checking the watch because they don't have to take it out of the pocket anymore. What we actually need is something that is, has a sense that you can negotiate the level of attention. So something that gives you a slight sensation, perhaps, that there might be something interesting, and then you have a slight glance. If it's not interesting, you might do a gesture, and then that interruption will fade away. Just like, when we're chatting, we can have a conversation, and if we're engaging well, you will give me feedback, and I will try to pick that up, or you will interrupt. It has to be this negotiation between different parts, different devices, and the person.
Yeah, no, I agree, I guess, because especially because looking all day at stats, like how much does an average American spend in front of a screen, and then you look at stats on obesity in America, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, okay, there is lots of issues that are caused by it, and just looking at your own behavior, looking how many times you unlock your phone, and actually counting it. If you download an app that counts it for you, you're like, at first you're like, I'm not one of these people, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm definitely one of these people. But at the same time, we use mobile phones for fairly specific things. Like I'm just thinking back of the things that I did today on my mobile phone. I wrote an email where I had to explain about a delivery that I'm expecting, and I attached a photo of the item that I was expecting. Yep. How can I do this with a voice command as opposed to using a weird way, like talking to Siri or Google search, okay Siri or okay Google, do this, do that, and sounding like you're talking to yourself in a social context. Like, text input does seem to be a pretty good form of doing things like this, but at the same time, I still need to stay there and look at that screen and actually go ahead and do it.
I don't think I'm suggesting that we should never take these out and use them and type with them. I'm for that. I think, though, that an analogy would be perhaps in terms of both design of the devices and the way we design, we're still very much kind of like in infants. So if you think about a small child, a very small child, and I've had the blessing to have 3 now, and when they're very tiny, they demand your attention. They scream and shout, and even as we get a bit older, we have to mature, and then some of us never do, and so we're always wanting people to look at us, and we're always wanting people to hear us, okay? But a mature adult, grown-up relationship is where you understand that there's more to it than you, and you need to be in synergy with other around around you. I think we just haven't got, this thing is an infant, right? This thing is a baby, and it is literally screaming out for our attention, and we, being good parents, want to feed it. But we're not realizing this actually isn't a baby. This is technology, and so it doesn't doesn't need us to feed it. So what we need to do as designers is work out what are the times when we do need to interact with it, when it needs to interact with us. What times can we just glance at it? Just like when I'm sitting around with my family. If I have an intense relationship with my family all the time, I think my partner would have left me years ago. Sometimes I just glance across and smile. Sometimes I can pick up some background discussions, and I think, keep my head down. I hope I'm not involved in this conversation, or I have to spring into action and help out with the dog. All right? Mm-hmm. But that's me being aware and then bringing to my foreground something and then having it sink away. Mm-hmm. So yes, you do need to go and take a photo, send a picture, but if you're doing this all the time, or you feel that you're only living if you've got this close to your hand, then what it is it's a not grown-up relationship. It's an infantile. I can't even say the word. It infantilizes you, and as a designer and device developer, it infantilizes us. We don't think beyond it, and I think that's a big challenge. How do we get grown-up design for people who want to have mature relationships? So, we're going to see this, I think, in users. Some of the data I've seen shows this kind of backlash away from being drawn to this. So there's going to be a market opportunity where grown-up design and grown-up services can speak to a sense of disease and not disease, dis-ease with the current trajectory.
Mm-hmm. So basically, are you saying about teaching phones how to give better social cues? So just annoy us less with notifications, be respectful of our time, and understand social context. Are those some elements of this grown-up design that you talk of?
Yes, I think so, and also taking its place. That seeing that, I mean, I think it's really hard as a designer and as an advocate of technology to realize that life is full of other things. The mobile phone is fantastic and wearables are great, but in fact, in the grand scheme of life, they're not actually the most significant element. That people's themselves, their bodies, their families, their livelihoods, these are important. And so how you make this take its place and be part of the family, rather than, going back to the analogy, your baby when it first comes keeps you awake, disrupts your routines. You know, if you've ever had a child or looked after a friend's child, you know, they're fantastic, but they drive you potty. You know, if the first 6 months of our first child, I was completely disorientated. I think I'm in the same life with this. You know, the 6 months is much longer for these things because they're maturing in a slower pace. That's where we're at. They disorientate, they take us out of our routines, they take us out of our comfort, and we need to get them to fit in as design.
So I think we spend lots of time talking about just, I guess, designing for mobility, so designing for people in movement, designing using different ways. But you know, you did acknowledge that there are some things for which we will actually need to type things, for which we will actually need to look at our screen and give it full attention. What do you think are some key things that, you know, are completely overlooked and need to desperately be improved on in the way in which we design for those full-on attention tasks on mobile phones or small or in general on small screens?
Yeah, well, going back to one of your examples of typing stuff, strangely enough, you know, if you have to ever write a long email or even a relatively brief one, you know, it's still a testament that people in their email sigs put, sorry for the brevity, I've done it on my iPhone or my Android or whatever. It seems strange to me, given all of the research that's gone on into text entry and now in terms of the screen size that you get, that people still find it difficult to, if you like, coordinate and put together content. So text is one of them. I mean, the advantages of, you know, say a big machine like the one I'm set in front of now is that I can have multiple things open, and I feel like a virtuoso sometimes. I'm running a document, you know, or an email, and I can quickly get another piece of content. I can look something up. I can meld that into the email. I can make a bit of video. I can attach it, and it feels fairly effortless. Now, try doing a task you felt flow with on your large screen, be it a spreadsheet, be it a creation of content, or you know, it's something simple, and see if you get that same sense of agency and flow on your mobile. I think not. You're going to feel baffled. You're going to feel even simple atomic tasks like entering text. It just feels like it's going to go wrong at any moment, and so you start using really short words and concepts when you want to express. Speech isn't the answer, I don't think, because it's for lots of reasons which I won't go into. But I feel a virtuoso when I'm using a large machine. And one of the design challenges that we're looking at is how do you capture that notion of, at this basic, it's flow, right? It's agency. But there's a sense that I'm developing a performance. I feel a magician sometimes when I'm using a large machine. And I feel that I'm being hobbled when I'm using a small device. So take any application that you have, and there are lots which are very useful, be it from looking up stuff on maps to writing an email to trying to work out your business plan on a spreadsheet. And some of those things you might think, well, they're not for mobiles. I think that's too much of a cop-out. I think you should choose challenging tasks, even if, you know, for the moment people don't want to do them, and just think, how can I get that sense of flow? People have tried, of course, you know, in terms of having multiple threads of windows. Nokia, way back, you know, had a notion of having lots of windows which you could drop out of and then drop back into. And so that was a nice attempt. But there's still masses for designers to think about. and lots of possibilities in labs and in companies. Of course, this isn't this isn't something people haven't thought of. It's just that there's a big design space that it's very exciting for people to get into.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you're saying that that all of these areas where we assume that it's just too difficult to do on a mobile device, all of this can be disrupted and improved and I guess made more fun than it currently is.
And one of the problems is, and something is beyond the individual designer, is the app model is very much until now around a parcel of content or service. So you open up an app and do something. Of course, what we actually want is flow between the apps, very easy way of sharing the content and data. And to a large extent, until recently, you were locked in. You couldn't write an app so you could access a file store or a cloud store in a very straightforward way. So there's been lots of debates, of course, about is the app model the best one, or is it going to the web a best one? I think ultimately apps, as currently configured, have a limited lifespan. I think lots of people have thought and written. Scott Jensen in Google has done a lot of. If you haven't read his work, if you look up Scott Jensen's blog, I'm sure you have. And he's got some really fantastic. Jensen, Jenson. Yeah. So he's written lots about just-in-time apps coming across the web, and people not having to do all this gardening that they have to do with apps. We just want these devices to provide it with some platforms, which we then, with our agency, become virtuosos to choreograph content and looking at data. So big space that lots of designers can get into. It's going to require some of the infrastructure providers to perhaps think and produce alternatives to apps, and people are. I think all of the big infrastructure providers who currently do apps are also thinking about alternative ways to provide platforms for this.
So here is a question, because with its acquisition of WhatsApp, Facebook kind of announced that they're thinking of WhatsApp as a potential platform. How would that work, and do you think that this wouldn't conversely make people who currently use WhatsApp stop using WhatsApp and start using another service which looks more like that SMS of the 90s really miss for the simplicity of use?
Yeah, I mean it's that's a really good question. That the underspecification of the interface with WhatsApp. And to a large extent, you take any of these platforms. If you take Twitter, I think one of the reasons it started to be so successful, again, it was straightforward. You know what you have to do. You just type these things. You press go. You have a limited number of characters, and that's great. Facebook, very limited in its aspirations to begin with, and then the temptation, as with everything in design, is to accrete. Well, what happens if we add this thing and that thing, and then perhaps we lock users in this way for great reasons, and for good business and also user-centered reasons. I think there's a danger. I think that the more that you message to users that you've kind of thought through exactly how this thing will benefit them, the more you can turn them towards disruptive apps and services that come along and say, it's about you. And then we just do one thing very simply, maybe, thinking back to Snapchat. Here it is, disappears. Because it's about the fact that you have some private things and transient things you want to share. And if WhatsApp adds too much or locks people in, I think there's a danger when something innovative comes along, people think, oof, I'm going. And that's one thing we've learned a lot. It's great. I think it's fantastic. It's kind of like capitalism gone crazy with users at the center of it. People will move. People will move. All companies try to have lock-in, of course, because if you can provide a good service, then you don't really want someone just going off and starting another email account or starting another social media account. But I think the days of over-heavy platforms can be numbered. And that's a great thing. That's a nice thing about doing design in the space. We could all be out of a job tomorrow.
Yay. I just realized that I spent
Or,
quite
or,
a lot of.
or
Uh-huh.
probably into another job.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So yeah, I realized I spent quite a long time asking you questions as we went, but I wanted to ask Lara and Ryan first of all, and then anyone else who is watching this live, of which I can see some people are, if they had any questions at all to ask.
Silence.
So
How would you,
Lara, Ryan.
how can you tell? Would they pop up on the screen?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I tried to enable Q&A, but it's disabled for some reason. So that's not going to work. But let me check on Facebook
You put
or on my chat whether I have.
right in by post. Oh, there's someone. Look at that. How's that work? Hello?
Actually, I have a question. It's not that closely linked to mobility, and yeah, but anyway, like this weekend I was discussing with my friends all those pictures that are uploaded on Instagram, and she told me that there's even a girl who's now showing how she took the pictures so that people really get mad on presenting themselves on the internet. So like some people go to Starbucks just to later on go to one street where no one can see you and then take a picture of your Starbucks cup to upload it to Instagram. And I was wondering, like, isn't that something that is against everything that we thought is sensible? Like, it's not handy. It makes it quite complicated. I mean, it's easy to upload the picture, but like people make it really complicated to take a picture, and that seems just crazy to me.
Yeah, that's the. Do you mean that this particular person is going out of their way to do something they could do much more simply, or do you mean
No, I mean like instead of using the platform to make life easier or to make it more fun, they kind of make it more complicated. So also when all those people start taking those selfies and that kind of stuff,
yeah.
it quite often destroys the like the flow, or on parties it's somehow interrupted. So it's not supporting you, but instead it's like annoying you.
Yeah, I mean both of those cases, the selfie and then people going out of their way to do something. I think it demonstrates that people want to perform, in my view, and they've always used props to do it. The question is whether or not, and I think you're right, current technology is pretty clunky to do a performance. I mean, I think the selfie perhaps is the prime exemplar of here is something where people want to be able to come together rather than to be pushed apart by this technology, and all we can do right now is a stick. On the other hand, I quite like that idea that you can choreograph people and it's open and it's other people can see you do it. We had Google Glass in Kai last year. Thad Starner did a fantastic exhibition showing all of the wearables over a period. It was great. Margaret Atwood came along to have a private view of that. She is a fantastic author, someone who's very insightful into technology. And she tried on the Google Glass. And she liked it. She said, she's very polite. Then she said to Thad, Thad, I can't do her accent, I'm afraid, it's fantastic. She said, Thad, the only trouble with these kind of things, headwear, is you can't do selfies. And I could see Thad went, oh my goodness. And he said, yes, you can take them off. And you can do a selfie like this. And I think, for me, that captured something. What Margaret Atwood had seen is that some technology makes us close in on ourselves and puts the rest of the world at a distance. What the selfie, and a selfie stick, even for all its geekiness, what it does is to say we're together. And let's be together and perform together. And I think that we see little hints in the two stories you gave, and as designers we then should think about, well, how could we make that less geeky, less clunky, and more go with the flow? That,
okay.
I might have answered a completely different question. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. I have a question from someone who was watching us, from the guy who tried to dial in, but his internet Africa question, and actually he has a question about Africa. So what is different when you're trying to design for mobile first. So obviously he's based in Africa, and he wants to support his African clients, developers. What is different if you're, as a designer, not thinking to design your app, business model, or whatever it is that you're designing for cross-platform, but you're just like, okay, there's going to be one screen. That screen is mobile. The internet quality not likely not going to be super top. What are some of the principles that you need to remember about when you design for that?
Lots. So I haven't said we've worked probably for the last 11, 12 years looking at these issues. So we've been very fortunate to work with people in South Africa, in Cape Town and in the Eastern Cape, and then also in India and other rural regions in emerging markets. And yeah, there are some fantastic opportunities, and lots has been written. But first of all, the notion of mobile first, and people talk about leapfrogging, don't they? There's a great opportunity here. Well, of course, I'm sitting in front of a very large screen. I've got a Mac Air on the side. I've got a Nexus phone here. I've got out of shot for various reasons, various wearables. I am not doing everything with this device. So my first call to arms is to say, let's just not accept the fact that people will only have these. We need to work for technology so that people can have an equality of access. And that, for sure, there's a big advantage, there's a big opportunity with mobiles, but we shouldn't stop there and think mobile only, or even mobile first, because my life isn't mobile first, it's mobile choreographed. I have lots and lots and lots of things which I put together. Jonathan Donner, who used to work for Microsoft Research, he's based in Cape Town, has done some interesting writing in this space, so you could Google Jonathan Donner's blog. The person who's listening and anyone who's in South Africa, there's a network of people who are interested in this, and we go back and forth to that region, and we can certainly platform anyone who's got a passion to look at innovative solutions in these emerging spaces. I'd love to help them and put them in touch with the networks that we have. It is very vast. I mean, when you talk about India, you go from ultra super connected users with higher end things than I'm ever going to have, right down to people we do some work up in right near the border of China and northern India, where there is very low literacy, there's very low power, grid power, there is low access to data plans, and much more importantly, of all of those things, the internet isn't full of content which is targeted in these people. So even if they could had time to learn all the languages that we have there, and they had data plans, and they had power, well, the fact is we've got to find ways for those communities to create content that is relevant to their lives and livelihoods, which are very different to many of ours, obviously. We've produced some toolkits. So I think if you typed into Google or to Bing, com-me toolkit, mobile, you might. I should check that. I hope you don't get anything else. You will get an example toolkit which gives people ideas about what they can do. Yes, if you type in com-me toolkit, you can get a whole lot of things open source. There are apps you can change. There are hardware designs around charging stations. It's just an example. It's not the best thing. And it could be a provocation for anyone like the person asking in South Africa, what should we do?
Cool. Very interesting. And this actually leads me to add, I guess, a very personalized question, not a general one. Because one of the questions that I get asked, because, obviously I want to work on this learning platform that allows for people to share their knowledge and really get the benefit of, going to an awesome college or an awesome school, of meeting people from all over the world, and actually starting, social networks with people who have like-minded, who are like-minded and who have similar interests. And the one question that I always get is, that's a very nice middle-class product. So how are you going to get to people who actually really desperately need education? And with that, I was, I guess, thinking, how how do you do this into how could you change this product offering of, obviously this requires high network connection to speak online during a video conference. Like, what are some principles that can even drive me to think about how would I adapt this model to something that could work in markets where I'm thinking right now there's only mobile phones and no and data plans are extremely expensive.
Sure. So I think the first thing is to recognize that it's not really a class thing. People do want to learn and to educate and to share. So we were privileged to about 10 years ago to look at how in rural Indian village contexts there is a very strong movement, and still is, there was then, of women's groups, primarily women's groups, meeting together, sitting around together and listening. Some of them would listen to tapes on standard tape playback machines. Some would use community radio to share stories and tips around microfinance, around how to bring up your kids, about health and sanitation, about schooling. Very powerful activist local groups who would then use the technology to hand to improve their lot. In that context, what we did was to look at, that was 10 years ago, I guess, what might be able to platform some of those interactions which are very strong. So we produced a system called Story Bank, and the idea is you'd have instead of everyone having a high-end device in their homes, you'd have in a community center where people were gathering anyway, you'd have a screen, and then people could come along to the screen and upload and download stories which were audio and visual and didn't require much literacy, which didn't require much knowledge of how to do menus on phones. Stories about microfinance, stories about education. And those stories then could be shared in broadcast mode, in the sense that people would sit around it in the community center, or in a distributed broadcast mode. I'd go up to the story bank, I'd see something which was interesting, I'd take it away, wander, and perhaps just to my 2 or 3 fellow neighbors sit around with the phone, maybe just listen to the audio. IBM have produced a spoken web system, and very successful, and we, just a disclaimer there, we've collaborated with IBM on looking at how to use their platform. They've done some very successful trials where there are voice forums. So farmers share tips, and then as tips are seen to be beneficial, they move up the rank. Microsoft in India, again, we collaborate with them, have a system presented at CHI this year, where, again, communities can rate content, and the content moves to the top. So that can be done over the telephone line, or with compression very cheaply over a data line. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of technology platforms, but fundamentally it's tapping into, again, the support networks that exist in these communities as the starting point for building education networks. Mm-hmm. So don't feel, I would encourage you, don't at all feel that this is a middle class thing, and there's amazing models of people who really want to change their world for their kids and for themselves, and they are doing it. They're just not using mobile phones. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my usual response to this is actually, it's great if I can help a few people in who would be considered global middle class, but who are stuck in the middle of nowhere in Poland with no access to global education and great ambitions to change the world. And this is low-hanging fruit. Yeah. Which can be reached relatively easily with, just a few dollars of advertising and a system that works to connect people like that. And if I can do that as a start, that's great. And then once I get to that point where I've, excluded and managed to materialize all of these opportunities, then I can move down the line to see who else I can help. But I'm just trying to, I guess, to be realistic.
One of my rules in design and doing things is, first of all, decide what you're passionate about, what you care about. Obviously, just don't jump in. You can waste time if there isn't a problem in the world to help or an opportunity. But once you've done your research, don't apologize. So if someone says to you, why are you doing this when you could be doing that? You say, well, the world's a big place, and you can go and do it. So be positive and help them, and say, but I am passionate about this. And I'm, me explaining why I'm doing it, it's wasting my time. If you want to come with me, you'll see by watching what I do why I value it. Because, we can all criticize. But what we have to
no. Of course, and that much I understand. And I also know that not everyone, feels would particularly love having 2 full-time jobs. So
my point line, if nothing else, is about getting people to see the positive and a way forward. So that's why I always, when people are asking me, why did I do this rather than that, I try to deflect that and get people to look at what they can do positively in whatever space they want to do.
Mm-hmm. No, that's actually a really, really good point too. So thanks so much for this fascinating conversation. Honestly, that bird to the left, bird to the right story is going to stick with me as I try to creatively think about designing for mobile phones and for mobile and for people, because I think that this conversation, surprisingly for me, ended up being more how to design for devices and more how to design for people, and allowing them to live their social lives and meet all of the needs that they have more effectively without being attached to these material objects that we have created. So thanks so much for taking the time.
It was really nice conversation, very stimulating, a nice way to end a Monday where I've had to do all sorts of things, and to be reminded that, together in conversation, and to people who might watch this in the future, that's a scary place. Please be kind when all the things we've said have turned out to be wrong. But it is about this dialogue together as designers and students and learners. And I'd like to encourage you in what you're doing. I think this experiment's fantastic. Keep doing it. Okay.
Thank you so much. I see Ryan dialed in. Ryan, did you have any question for Matt before we go, or okay? Good.
Okay. Nice to see you.
I just say goodbye.
Bye. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.